have essentially a layer of paint on all of the skin that shows from each of the people that are at the dinner party. But at the moment, they're all caricatures. It's sort of flattened out caricatures, and they have personality, but the personalities are more cartoony than I would like. So at this point, I'm going to come in and I'm going to start developing each face so that it is much more reminiscent of somebody who might actually be at one of my dinner parties. And in fact, in some cases, I'll probably reference from sort of my memory people that have been to specific dinner parties of mine and try to give each person a personality that works with the other people that are around them. I'm going to mix up some of the paint that's in here to get a dark and a light. I'm just going to use the dark and the light. So this is kind of a nice, you see that all of this is turning into sort of a gray. And it's a combination of all these things that I've used before. So this is going to be my dark. And my light is going to be this white. And I want black, which I've got. And the neck. Okay, much better. It looks now like somebody who might actually be at a dinner party instead of somebody who's coming in from Venus for a quick trip to take specimens. So this diamond shape here is a mouth that references these two eyes with this nose. Yeah, all right, so if I do that, we're going to come through that eye. At this point, when you get sort of to this stage, your second, your third pass through, when I leave the studio, I take it with me entirely. So I then spend the whole time when I'm away from here, even if I'm doing something else, going to a ball game, paying my bills, whatever, I'm taking it with me and it's always in my head. And I'm really sort of developing this relationship. And this is the part of a painting where I really start to get pretty jazzed. A portrait to me is not about the painter who's making the painting. And it's not about the subject who's sitting for it, if there's, in fact, a model. But it's about the end result character that's created. So it then takes on a life of its own. It sort of gives us this role of creationism as mortals, which is fascinating to me. I keep a skull on my desk, which is a memento mori in Latin. Painters and writers, etc., have had a skull on their desk for hundreds and hundreds of years now. It reminds you of your mortality. And the idea is not so much to say, hey, guess what, there's an end game here. It's more to remind you that you better pay attention to what you're doing while you're doing it, because you're only here for a very limited amount of time. And that these creations that you put together end up outliving you, whether they're good or bad. We're going to have three layers here. This guy in the foreground, this in the middle ground, and this in the background. 1, 2, 3 going back. And this face, this neck here will turn into a face here, and that shoulder will come into a face that will be centered around over here. So it'll be really right, left, right, I think. And now it's getting to be pretty solid. Good. Okay. So the next thing that we're going to do here, which will start to identify male and female, because obviously if you're wearing a jacket and tie, you're less likely to be a woman than if you're wearing a dress. So now let's come back in here. This angle is too sharp. Let's come back to that angle there. There. This painting will really jump, especially when we add shadow at the end. So the last few steps, it's like compound interest. If you have the choice of $1 billion or a penny doubled on every place of a chessboard, take the penny on the chessboard. It doesn't kick in until the last row, but then your numbers compounding explode. And the same thing is true with a painting. You have to think about it as a very slow process where at the very end you really get the bang for your buck. And that's the same as what's going on here. There are different layers playing in different kinds of ways. The combination of a very smooth stroke with a palette knife, then with something very rough coming from a brush, and it gives motion and movement to something which is otherwise just flat color. Palette knives serve both to add as well as to subtract, which I'll show you in just a second. Ultimately, that's where the volume of the roundness of our beings are created.